money to your life. Federally insured by the NCUA.
All right, 20 minutes after 8 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. I have fond memories of when my son was little and my two nephews were little. I would take the three boys fishing all the time when they were little. And the other day I was looking on Facebook, and my nephew, who's probably in his mid-30s by now. I don't know how old he is by now. But
he's about 36.
And anyway, so he's still fishing. He still loves fishing, and he was showing himself holding some fish and cooking the fish. Yeah, he was good. So anyway, we have a guest right now who's going to talk to us about our fish. We have, apparently, I never knew this, but we have a lot of fish that we eat that come from overseas, and the fish we catch here we send overseas. Why are we not eating our local fish? Gulf shrimp, I guess, is the big one, and then New York oysters. And Alaskan sockeye salmon. I think there's a fourth one somewhere. Paul Greenberg is our guest. He's an award-winning New York Times bestselling author, a longtime commentator on aquaculture and the oceans. He's a contributor to the New York Times. He's been on NPR's Fresh Air and All Things Considered, and he has lectured at Harvard as well as the U.S. Senate. Wow, what an honor to have him on our little show. American Catch, The Fight for Our Local Seafood is the book. Good morning, Paul Greenberg. Good morning, Paul.
Hi, Larry. How you doing?
Pretty good. Where are you right now?
I'm in New York City, a great coastal city that people don't think of as a coastal city, but that's where I am.
Isn't that weird? And you got that big fish thing down in Lower Manhattan, right? I thought that was our fish, and I thought we were eating it and selling it here.
Well, the Fulton Fish Market is actually right near where I live, but unfortunately, the market was closed down in 2005 and moved up to the Bronx. And, to me, that was the thing that started me thinking about this book that I've just, had out called American Catch. New York has lost its Fulton Fish Market, but this country is losing its local seafood markets to the point where something like 91% of the seafood that we eat in this country comes to us from abroad.
What is?
Even though it's crazy, right?
Is that a political thing? Did somebody make a decision, or is it a business thing?
It's a market thing. It's a lot of different factors. Hey, I wrote a whole book about it, but especially when you look at what kind of country we have here, the U.S. controls more ocean than any country on Earth. So much more ocean than we have land. So we really should, when you think about it, seafood should be a kind of key part of the American diet. But we actually eat only about 15 pounds of seafood per person per year, whereas we eat about 200 pounds of land food meats, pigs, chickens, and so forth, per person per year. So
I never knew
it's a real
that.
disconnect. And so that's kind of why I wanted to peek underneath the hood of this whole weird economy and understand what was going on.
Wow, and shrimp is huge down here. I mean, you see it everywhere. There's a shrimp pizza. Have you ever had shrimp pizza?
I know, that was weird. It was good.
I think I've seen shrimp on my pizza before, but shrimp to me, you put your finger on it, that's really at the heart of this weird disconnect. So Americans eat more shrimp than any seafood. We eat, I guess, as much shrimp as the next two most consumed seafoods, tuna and salmon combined. So, and I think, when you're down there on the coast in Florida or, Louisiana, whatever, you're sort of under this impression, oh, well, it must be all local shrimp that's coming in from those shrimping boats I see from time to time. But really, something like 90% of the shrimp that we consume in this country is coming from abroad, and a lot of it from Southeast Asia and most of it farmed.
But if we don't eat that much of it, why do we need to import any of it?
Well, we as a country, we're, so while per person we don't eat a lot of seafood, we're a big country, and we actually have the second largest sort of overall seafood footprint in the world. I think we're second only to China in terms of the sheer pounds of seafood we consume. But what is really more interesting is the kind of fine-scale story here. So much seafood is imported, but we're also exporting about 3 billion pounds of American seafood every single year. So what that amounts to is that we're taking really sort of nice, omega-3 rich, stronger tasting fish. We're sending that abroad, and in return, mostly what we're getting is sort of flavor neutral imported farmed fish and shellfish like shrimp, like tilapia, like Pangasius catfish, which I don't know if you knew this, but Pangasius catfish is actually the 6th most consumed seafood in America. Mostly comes from Vietnam, and most people don't even know what it is.
Wow.
Really?
Wow.
Gosh.
It doesn't even seem, it doesn't make sense, especially when you say how much fishing goes on around here.
And we have catfish farms here in Florida.
Yeah.
I know. Well, the catfish farmers, I did a whole story for the Times a few years ago about the catfish wars that were going on between catfish farmers here in America and Vietnam. But at first, what was happening with catfish was, so they had this two species of catfish in Vietnam that are technically catfish, but they're very distantly related to what we call catfish. And they were being just sold in this country as catfish. And so a lot of times, they would get sort of slotted in for a cheaper price than what American producers could produce catfish for. So
Wow.
there's a really, really striking disconnect on that. And that kind of thing, that kind of swapping and substituting happens all the time. I mean, there was a recent report by the nonprofit organization Oceana, which found, I think, 20 to 40% of seafood in restaurants was being mislabeled. And
Wow.
a lot of times that mislabeling is because, producers are swapping in a cheaper product for what they're saying they're producing. So, time and time again, like, red snapper, for example, right, a huge popular seafood down there. The number of times that things like tilapia get swapped in for red snapper is pretty striking.
Oh.
And American consumers, they just not, they're not that conscious of it. They don't have the fine scale taste buds to kind of figure out when it is they're being hoodwinked.
Makes you want to go get some fish, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
What about the Oyster Bay? Is Oyster Bay still an oyster place?
Yeah, well, there's still oysters in Oyster Bay. Yeah, so that was another one of the big seafoods that I looked at in this book. Oysters used to be really central to the American seafood economy, particularly New Yorkers. The average New Yorker used to eat about 600 local oysters per person per year. That was like local from actual New York City. Very, very striking. But now, of course, we don't eat any from New York City, and very few per person anyway. And to me, that is really the main... I don't know. I think that tells you something. Oysters, require clean water, and water has to be clean in order to eat them. And once we started to lose our oyster economy all around this country, and we're losing it in Florida, as you know, as well. Once you start to lose oysters, you sort of lose the incentive to keep your water clean. So that's why I decided to really look at oysters as a major.
Oh, that's interesting. And does that a lot have to do with the oil spills, like the one in the Gulf and elsewhere?
No, it really has to do with our common behaviors.
Just our behavior? Can I ask you a question? Is it because we consider foreign imported things more exotic? Is that why we like... And I guess the people overseas would feel the same way about our fish.
Honestly, I think it has to do with price. It is much cheaper to sell a foreign-raised tilapia or a shrimp, mostly because we're paying these people close to nothing. I don't know if you saw, but in Thailand, the AP broke a big story about how slavery was a huge part of the Thai seafood economy. So when you're paying people less money, you can sell the fish for less money, and so vendors naturally take advantage of that. And as for why people abroad are buying our fish, they're buying our fish because it's good. They're paying top dollar. And it's not poor people that are buying American fish. It's the rising up classes of China that are buying them because they know America has good environmental regulations, that we have good fisheries management, and that we have good fish. And so,
eat American
rather than
fish.
us reaping the benefits. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if we eat American fish, then we won't be supporting slavery. We're inadvertently...
That's right.
Innocently, I guess you could say.
Another good reason to eat the American catch. I mean, it's really an important thing to do, I think, as a responsible diner. I mean, for years we've been hearing about how we need to eat better from the land. I mean, I think it's time we ate better from the sea.
I love the message, Paul. Nobody else has ever delivered that message on this show. We've been doing it, almost 20 years.
Yeah.
American Catch is the book. PaulGreenberg.org. That's the website.
That's right.
All right. Thank you, Paul. Thank you for being on the air with us today. We'll be right back.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Fox News Radio, I'm Lillian Wu. 2 convicted killers authorities say are dangerous remain on the loose as police sift through hundreds of tips.
Police in upstate New York are now guarding schools as a precaution. And again, these men are extremely dangerous. People are told not to approach them. Authorities in Canada, Mexico, also assisting in the search at this hour.
Fox's Heather Childers. Authorities believe David Sweat and Richard Matt used power tools to escape the high security prison near the Canadian border. Speaker. Former House Speaker Dennis Hastert slated to appear in a federal court in Chicago today, his first public sighting since being indicted.
He's expected to be arraigned here on charges that he evaded bank regulations as he withdrew hundreds of thousands of dollars and that he lied to the FBI about what he did with the money. Hastert's accused of plotting to pay $3.5 million as hush money to someone to keep quiet about a past misconduct.
Fox Radio's Jeff Manasso, Fox News. We report, you decide.
Fox News Early Prime, breaking down business news and its impact on your bottom line. Your World with Neil Cavuto.
That's how I do business. That's why I am business.
Bold positions and brash opinions on the topics America is buzzing about. The Five.
How do you think this will set in with the American people?
This will be the pulse of the nation.
Washington insight and political know-how from the best in the Beltway. Special report with Brett Baer.
The epicenter of the political